Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Risk and Resiliency Room. Lorenzo, we're still waiting for you, so click that share audio and video button as soon as you are here and can see it. It is regular time for you, Peter, I believe, and very late for Campbell. So thanks, Campbell, for staying up for us. Really appreciate it. We've got up until 4 o'clock together. So we've got 32 minutes to dive into the conversation about risk and resiliency. I think that it is a bit, there's sort of big words. That can mean a lot of different things and nothing all at the same time. But I think we actually had a conversation yesterday about maybe renaming the room something along the lines of catastrophes and fatalities, which we never would have done because it's too on the nose. But that really is what we talk about, what we mean when we talk about risk in the energy system, about balancing the needs of a changing grid with the dangers inherent and the risk inherent with operating these massive systems, which have electricity all running through them. So as we wait for Lorenzo, if you can hear me, do click that share video and audio button, but we will soldier on. Peter and Campbell, before we dive into that risk and resiliency discussion, I do want our audience to continue to get to know you. So I'd love you to share a win you've had recently or just something on your mind that you think the audience might be interested in. Peter, I can see your mic is not muted, so do you want to go first?
Definitely, thanks, Riley. So hello, everyone. Diving right into it with a recent win. Obviously, this might be the first time you hear about Aperio for maybe all of you, maybe some of you, but bear with that. Happy to take questions to elaborate on that also. But as I mentioned, Aperio is all about ensuring data integrity, and that's important because that is underlying every task and process in industrial operations, anywhere from optimization to safety. So some of the wins that we have had recently, it's actually 2 wins. We are seeing that companies are realizing this at a very rapid pace. So where we a year ago were speaking to 2 large companies in the US, and both of them said, well, we think we are covered on this topic for now. Both of these companies have came back to us within the past 3 weeks and said, okay, Aperio, let's speak again, because this is more difficult than we had thought. So I think this is really for us a win. Our message is getting out there. There's a real market for it. There's a real demand for it, and we can supply into this demand.
Thanks, Peter. Campbell?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've seen maybe most surprisingly is that we were very disrupted by COVID, but what we've seen with companies investing in worker safety, unfortunately due to the pandemic, it's really meant that as businesses return to operations, they've sort of carried that forward. And we've seen really incredible growth this year in inbound demand for Proxxi in our traditional verticals, as well as emerging ones like data centers and manufacturing.
Great. Thanks, Campbell. I've just been letting Adam know that Lorenzo is with us, but can't get on the stage. So Lorenzo, hold tight. I've just let Adam know. So we will get you on here as soon as we can. Okay, so welcome everyone. I've just put in the chat box, you can hopefully see, I've just let you know to introduce yourself if you want to and ask questions here. I'm going to dive into some questions I have, but as soon as we start getting questions from the audience, I'll feed those to our founders. So we'll keep that conversation as dynamic and interesting as we can. And we're certainly happy to dive into any questions, burning questions the audience has. Okay, but to kick us off, I always like to start broad and then sort of narrow in. So I'd love to know what risk and resiliency means to both of you and your companies and why you think it matters. Peter, do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. I can do that. So I think we really see it as sort of a license to operate, and that's also what we hear from the customers, that is the license to operate in the way that absolutely has to be in place. And obviously companies have a zero tolerance for fatalities and injuries, and we also see that tolerances for system outages are becoming lower and lower. So the expectation for system uptime is sort of conversely much higher. And with the modern way of operating grids and power systems, power generation assets and the like, it's this massive interconnected network, obviously, of nodes and the that all need to work together in unison, and this depends on data. That the data is sort of the lens that you're looking at this system through. So that needs to be in place, because otherwise the lens is distorted and what you see might not be the actual state of the system. And in many cases that won't mean an outage. That won't mean an outage. In many cases that'll be sub-optimization or other sort of operational drawbacks, which in itself with the environmental agenda is problematic enough, but it won't be outages. But in some cases it will. And these are the sort of the very tail end of the bell curve cases that do remain, that do lead to outages, that we are then helping remove with Aperio, making sure, for example, that all mechanical equipment on substations is working correctly, as an example.
Thanks, Peter. Campbell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think because of the nature of our product and the problem we're trying to solve, we tend to focus more on risk as opposed to resiliency. Obviously, when there's an injury or a catastrophic event, there is a disruption in the operation, but that doesn't tend to get as much attention as sort of the risk side in terms of the injury or fatality and what's happening. But we are seeing focus around that grow more and more, because I think many people focused on safety originally as a values proposition in terms of something that it was the right thing to do. But as more and more organizations are starting to quantify the actual direct and indirect costs around injury, they're starting to realize that there's actually real financial payback by making these investments. So we're now actually starting to talk not just to operational groups, but to actual risk groups within the organizations we're targeting, because they see simple and effective solutions like ours as a way to really generate positive returns. Yeah,
great. Peter, you weren't going to jump in there, were you? Nope, I just saw you move.
No.
So I think you touched on this, Campbell, I guess, in sort of weighing up that need to deal with risk, but also sort of build resiliency into an energy system. How do you see companies currently doing that?
Building resiliency?
Well, but I guess I'm thinking about balancing the risks of the need to sort of look to the future as well as sort of manage the day-to-day.
Well, this may seem ironic, but we're actually one of the beneficiaries of utilities and the entire industrial sector investing in resiliency. The investment in renewables and battery and on-site storage and multiple connections to the grid actually increases the complexity of electrical systems. And while that's great for uptime and continued operations, it actually has led to an order of magnitude increase in near misses, and with a handful of our customers, a 5 to 6x increase in injuries. And so they are actually looking at solutions like ours to sort of combat some of the unintended consequences of them investing in resiliency around their core product, which is generally delivering energy or manufacturing a product, with the consequence that some of their workers are at higher risk. So I think it's sort of an unintended consequence in terms of how it impacts our business.
Hi, Lorenzo. Let me ask Peter about that question, and then we'll bring you in. So, Peter, what do you think? How do you strike that balance?
Of the balance, what? Oh, can you repeat that?
Oh, the balance. I'm thinking about the balance of sort of future planning. So, how do I ensure data integrity is? How do you see companies balancing the need to sort of look forward and think about data of the future versus the need to keep the systems running and look at data today? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So unfortunately, I might say we do still see that people tend to say, well, let's deal with the data integrity a bit later. You know, we just had a system outage. We don't have time to deal with it. Kind of reminds me of this cartoon from the Stone Age. You see two people pushing like square rocks, and then a guy comes around with a round rock, a wheel, obviously. Hey, I have, try this. It's much easier. They're like, no, we're too busy to try this new stuff. So data integrity really is an integral part of this, and we also see that the better the data integrity, the better the overview of the system, the better the ability to keep it running and to plan properly. So I think it should be definitely thought into any system operation much earlier than it is. But I also think that we are seeing this switch happening now. This is a change that we see developing.
Yeah. Hi, Lorenzo. Thanks for persisting.
Hi, Riley.
Sorry
for being late. I had
no, all
issues.
Good. Peter's also navigated the tech hurdles of getting onto Hopin, so we're doing well. So Lorenzo, might hand over to you. I think I'm not sure if I'd love you to share, a win or something you think the audience would be interested in to learn about something more about Zaphiro, and then might get you to let us know what you think about risk and resiliency before we move on to our next question. And to the audience, I'm hoping we've got some passionate engineers watching us who have a lot of thoughts on this topic. So please do pop some questions into the chat box if you have any. All questions welcome. All right, Lorenzo, over to you.
So as I was presented before, Zaphiro is very much into risk and resiliency. Because we have a part of our solution focused on blackout management. So as we all know, risk and resiliency now, especially in the energy industry, matters a lot because energy always supply very critical infrastructures. And our customers, the customers of Zaphiro, are electrical utilities that have the main goal of providing uninterrupted energy supply to their customers. And maybe you don't know, but a blackout can disrupt more businesses that earthquakes or every other catastrophic event. And so the value of resiliency is really huge. And at Zaphiro, we address this with a fault location solution that basically can pinpoint, identify the short circuits in the electrical grid in a very precise and quick way.
Yeah, great. And I'd love to build on that. I could talk in theory. I love talking in theory about risk and resiliency, but why don't we get into some practical examples about how your solution assists with this? So Campbell, do you want to let us know, where does your solution fit? And I'd also love to know if you've got a recent example, something that can help sort of paint a picture about your role here. Oh, and you're on mute.
I mean, like where we help is actually keeping workers. I mean, so the examples that, other than seeing that the product is working, is we always get wins from people who basically were about to commence work and have recognized that there's actually been human error. That's really the examples that we sort of stack up on a day-to-day basis. And if that ever happens during a trial, it actually basically means that the customer buys, because it's proof that that's what they were looking for. So the risk that we eliminate is the human error, and the challenge for us is to demonstrate that in a reliable way. I think the recent examples of that are just where we're seeing it in new environments where we weren't sure if it would be able to work. We always thought we'd be a high voltage solution, around utilities where you sort of hear about sort of catastrophic injuries, but we didn't think we'd be applying ourselves in low voltage environments. And we see that the same risk is present, and there's actually a lot more people who are at risk on a day-to-day basis there. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Peter, where's Aperio's role, and what's a practical example of something you've done recently?
So one of the use cases that we have is within the control centers that are monitoring the alarms. So when alarms go off on transmission substations, for example, typically the workflow today is not capable of determining whether the alarm is true. Let's say a dissolved gas analysis alarm. The system today is having a very hard time in the control room determining whether it's a true positive or a false positive. So in 90% of cases, they actually send people physically to the transformer to inspect, okay, do we have a DGA problem or was it a false alarm? When they arrive at the substation, that's when, to Campbell's point, they start, approaching a risky situation. They need to shut down the substation, wait for it to cool, then go in and inspect in this relatively high risk environment. So if we are able to keep them in the control room, to help them understand already in the control room, if it is indeed a false positive they're dealing with, there will be no need for sending people into this situation. And this is a very common use case actually we see among the TSO clients, this determining whether an alarm is a true or a false positive.
Mm. And how many alarms do you think are coming in? Like, is this something that's happening weekly? Is it happening monthly? How frequently how big of a problem is that?
So it differs a lot depending on the setup, but it's definitely more than a weekly. It's more towards daily. There are a lot of alarms, and there are alarms at different levels. Some are hypercritical and some are less critical, and they tend to be sort of a pyramid distribution. So obviously, most alarms are less critical and some are hypercritical. But what can happen is that you get this alarm fatigue, so that you always have blinking lights going off in the control room. What happens is the operators will just stop trusting it, say, well, this light is always blinking. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but the key is to know, okay, if it's blinking now, do I need to act on it? And this is the clarity that we try to provide, because for many reasons, there can be false alarms. For good reasons, if you have hundreds of thousands of sensors across your network, at any point in time, some will be broken or failing or drifting or whatever, and there's really nothing to do about that. That's just the fact of the matter dealing with so much equipment. So what you need is this layer to understand, the data that's coming in. How do you assess that? How do you make sure that it's so trustworthy that operators actually base their decisions on it and are able to take the right decisions, such as not going and investigating a false positive, but focusing on true positives.
Thanks, Peter. And now, Theodore, I could see, I'd love to bring you up onto the stage, but I'm not able to, I'm afraid. But I would love you to, if you've got any thoughts to share or if you've got a question, please do put them into the chat box. I'm going to write another message so you can see where that is. So please do contribute. All questions are welcome. Lorenzo, where does, I know that I would say, for some context, the Zaphiro tech came out of a university. We call that deep tech. It's always really exciting. And I must say, it did take me a while to learn. I work with a lot of startups, and it took me a while to get my head around Zaphiro because of that sort of, because it's a complex technology developed over many years. So for those who haven't met you before, where does Zaphiro fit in? Where does Zaphiro fit in to a company looking to sort of minimize their risk or build resilience?
So indeed, we are a deep tech company where the solution is quite complex. But to keep it simple, we work with electrical utilities mainly in the distribution segment. So not also in the high voltage transmission, but our main focus on the distribution system operators that need nowadays to invest in monitoring and automation, since until today there was basically they were blind about what is happening in the distribution grids. Apart some few advanced utilities, most of the utilities in the world don't know what are the energy flows or what is the voltage in the distribution grid. And basically what Zaphiro is trying to achieve is now that this energy transition has to happen, and so renewables, etc., being connected to the distribution grids and are disrupting the way they should be operated, we provide a monitoring layer to let the utility operator know what is happening into the grid. And this is the first milestone to be achieved in order then to do many things in the future. Like then we can build on top of that applications like fault management, outage management, or providing services to the customers, etc. But first we need the monitoring layer. Otherwise, this is not achievable. And we are doing it with an innovative technology that is called phasor measurement units, that has been conceived some years ago, but we adapted it to the distribution grid to make a very scalable solution also, because this is a big challenge.
Yeah, great. And how have you, Lorenzo, how have you worked with a company recently? What's an example of how you've used that tech?
So we have customers all around the world. We have customers in Europe, US, and also China with China Light and Power in Hong Kong. And they have sometimes different needs. So some are interested in the monitoring of the grid to increase the resiliency, so for outage management. Some others are instead more interested in the integration of renewables. For example, we have worked with a company here in Europe interested in exploiting a utility scale battery of 2.5 megawatts in order to provide multiple services and to control the energy flows into the grid. That is also the future when with markets that are at higher speed. This is becoming very important. So yes, we have various clients with different needs, and our solution is very flexible to address different challenges, from outage management to just monitoring, or also other analytics on the data we gather.
Thanks, Lorenzo. All right, so you're all three of you are from overseas, which is great, and we hope to be able to welcome you here soon. But what I'd love you to be able to tell an Australian audience, what lessons do you think can be learned from broadly overseas? You can pick whichever country or region you like. Peter, I might throw to you first. What do you think the lessons are for us here?
So yeah, it's interestingly what we see is that the Australian energy system tends to be more advanced in terms of digital solutions than overseas. And I think the conclusion we've been drawing on that is that, you know, it's a more difficult environment to operate in, much more geographically dispersed area. If you want to bring power from, you know, Sydney out to the bush, you need, you know, a lot of substations. You don't want to be maintaining them on a daily basis. So in that way, the Australian power market, energy market, seems to be very, very advanced. And I think a solution like Aperio's fit very well into such a situation, because most companies would already be at a stage where they know they've felt the impact, maybe even identified that some of the pain points they're having are due to sensor issues or data integrity issues. So in that way, I would say, you know, the lesson is to keep up the leadership position that you guys seem to be in. And this is obviously talking mainly power utilities. With us, we also work across oil and gas, across chemicals, process manufacturing in general. Situation is a bit more sort of, the playing field is a bit more even there, but particularly for power and utilities, I think this is our impression, at least based on who we've been engaging with.
And Peter, before I bring the others into that question, do you think there's any lessons cross-sector? Like, what do you think are there any lessons in those other sectors, the mining and other sectors you're working in, for the energy industry?
Yeah, I really think what the energy industry is doing in terms of ensuring uptime is something that any sector can learn from, because I think in chemicals, for example, there tends to be an acceptance that process lines do break down, you know, it's too bad, but you know, that's just a fact of life. And I don't think it has to be. I think digital solutions can really help turn this around, and I think this is really a great lesson from power, particularly transmission, perhaps to maybe even power generators, but definitely the chemicals, the oil and gas, the mining.
Great, thanks, Peter. Campbell, what lessons do you think you can learn from overseas? And I know you also work cross-sector, so I'd love any sector lessons.
Do you mean what we can learn from Australia, or what Australia can learn from the rest of the world?
Oh, look, I'm happy for you to go in either way.
I mean, because I was going to say the impression I got is that that the Australian companies that we've engaged with are actually much more from a from a values point of view and a legal point of view, much more progressive than any other jurisdictions we've seen. Europe is similar, but they're sort of very much focused on worker safety and sort of, you know, having serious consequences for that. So that's something that just sort of instills sort of the need for worker safety from the top down. I think the thing that I guess I'm surprised by, sort of more across industries, is that utilities tend to be early adopters of a lot of new safety practices, but they tend to be slower adopters of technology that, you know, going back to resiliency, that sort of improve operational performance. And what we're finding is that these other non-utility sectors are actually much faster adopters of technology. And so I think that that's something that is probably, as an industry, utilities are going to have to recognize. And I mean, I think they've got challenges all around them, so they have to pick their battles. But on our side, we see it sort of being one where they're historically they've sort of set the safety standard, and I just wonder if they're going to remain the leaders, or if other industries are going to sort of take their place around what is the best standard for worker safety.
Yeah, well said. Lorenzo, what do you think about lessons from overseas? I think you're mainly focused on in the energy sector, but any other, you know, any lessons you've learned from other sectors as well?
So let's say that from our perspective, talking with utilities in Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, we saw that from the technical point of view, they were quite advanced in terms of microgrids, that are these local communities where the energy is locally produced and consumed. And this is the future. If you see at the data, they are increasing exponentially in the following years. And there is the need to have very fast control of the energy flows. And this is exactly a perfect use case for our technology that is providing fast monitoring of the grid. And also they can even be, these microgrids can even be completely disconnected from the main big grid. That increase or the challenges in the stability of this grid. So I think this part of the world is very much advancing this, even because there are little islands that are quite prone to this type of operation of the grid. And also in Australia, they are very much concerned about bushfires that can be, the ignition can be caused by electrical conductors that have a fault. And this is exactly one of the solutions that we are proposing, namely to detect the fault before it happens, so early detection of these faults to avoid whatever consequence, including bushfires.
Yeah, well said. And that's a huge topic here in Australia, and hopefully one that we won't be talking about much this summer, but we'll see. I think everyone on the call will understand that's something we're all waiting in nervous anticipation for. Okay, we're coming up to time very quickly. We've got 3 minutes to go, and I thank everyone who stayed with us. I know it's a small but passionate group that cares about risk and resiliency, and I appreciate that and that may not lead to a group that's asking a lot of questions, and that is okay, because we're here to talk to you anyway. But in the absence of questions, Peter, Campbell, and Lorenzo, what I might ask to close is for you to, if we have a networks operations engineer from Transgrid watching us, which I'm sure we do, is there anything that you would like them to know, or any misconceptions, or what's the, if you can get the ear for 2 minutes of a network ops person at a transmission company, what are you saying to them? I guess at the ear of them for 1 minute, given we're nearly at time. Peter.
So I would say, it's another elevator pitch.
It's maybe not quite the right question.
Yeah, I want to say a lot of things. No, I think I would say that, the most of the ingredients are already there, and they have the devices, they have the equipment, they have the sensors, they have a lot of the pieces in place, but data integrity as sort of how do you say, a centralizing or a unifying element is really going to make a very big and very tangible difference.
Well said. Campbell?
Yeah, I think what we say to customers is, you probably have a world-class safety system in place, and what we're finding is that humans are humans and they make mistakes, and you need engineered solutions to get to really make your team totally safe. And what we're targeting and what we're seeing is we're going to eliminate 80% of those remaining electrical injuries. So it's a pretty valuable way of getting there. It's going to be very hard to get with additional process or additional PPE.
Well said. And Lorenzo, final word to you.
So, yeah, something that maybe I've not mentioned before because of lack of time. Where I'm sure that Transgrid and other operators are looking at monitoring solutions right now for the future. And I think one element that has to be that is very important is the scalability of the solution. And at Zaphiro we care, and the integration also with current system. And at Zaphiro we both address these two elements because we have a solution that is very, very easy to install, so that allows a very fast deployment and make it scalable. And also we don't want to disrupt the daily operation of these utilities, otherwise we will fail. And so we cared a lot about the integration with their current SCADA or ADMS system. So we just measure the data, extract the relevant information, and communicate only the relevant information, not like a flood of data to the utility operators, so that they, as Peter was pointing out before, they will not see thousands of alarms per day popping up in their system, but just the relevant alarm with the message attached that where they really know what to do.
Thanks, Lorenzo. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. That brings us to time. A huge EnergyLab thank you to Peter, Campbell, and Lorenzo for joining us early in the day, very late at night for you, Campbell. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you very much.
A real pleasure. It's been so lovely working with all three of you. And a big thanks as well as always to Transgrid and Endeavour Energy for sponsoring the program. We love working with them. So I've just popped everyone's LinkedIn pages into the chat box. So we really encourage you to follow the work of these startups, to support them where you can. A LinkedIn page is always a great place to start, and a lot of them will have newsletters as well if you go onto their websites. And also we always love people supporting EnergyLab and following us on LinkedIn as well. So that is the end of our conversation today. Thank you everyone for being here. We'll do it again soon. So have a lovely morning, evening, or night, or lunch. Thanks as always for joining an EnergyLab event. We will welcome you back soon. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks, Riley. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.